Last time I showed you some crazy physics, introducing a real-world physics engine to Minecraft, but this time I'm going to show you a really cool resource pack which completely overhauls and changes the animations for each and every single mob in the game. This is going to be pretty interesting, and let's just see how the movement has completely changed. So the pack in question today is something called Fresh Animations, which is actually just a resource pack which relies on Optifine, CEM, and custom mob variations and animations to actually function correctly and work. So this introduces animated blinking textures, a few extra details to a few of the mobs, and some extra texture variants for some mobs too. This is really cool, so let's start off and we shall spawn the villager. So the villager, what's different? Okay, so what's changed? What has changed about this villager so far? Well, you'll see that now he's actually breathing. He actually has a completely idle animation where he breathes and he'll focus on the player, and you can see his eyes even move from left to right, so he now has beady eyes which actually have full player tracking. Okay, which is pretty cool. But let me show you something really interesting. Now you'll see the walk cycle's different. He bobs up and down when he walks, so there's actually more fluidity with his movement, and his nose actually moves from left to right. But look what happens when he gets attacked. So let's spawn a zombie, which also looks really cool, but we'll focus more on this later. The villager now, when he gets attacked, he runs super fast and he's doing this bobbing animation, but his eyes also change too. Now, I'm not sure if I can show you this unless the zombie hits him again. Okay, look, if the zombie's in his vicinity or his location, the villager's eyes will go crazy and he'll start running, okay, to show he's scared. And when he gets hit, his eyes will go wonky as well. So they kind of have more emotion in how they react towards hostile mobs, which is a really cool change, which isn't usually present in vanilla. So next, let's take a look at the iron golem. So obviously we're going to spawn this dude with blocks of iron, and we're going to spawn him right next to the villager. Boom. Okay, so now we have the iron golem, okay, and we can spawn some zombies around this guy, and we can give him a bit of a challenge to fight. You'll see he full-on throttles, swipes them with his arms. Now the vanilla iron golem, I believe, does actually whack mobs with both arms. This guy is alternating between one or two arms, so he uses his left and then his right, and he's using single arm strikes to actually attack the enemies, which is a little bit different and more unique. So this makes for some really cool animations. Now you'll see when he walks, it's a very similar feel, but he's kind of leaning from left to right a little bit more than he usually does. And you'll see that his nose is curved a little bit, and he's now making facial expressions. So with the iron golem, his eyebrow shifts, and it kind of rotates to show expression and emotion on his face, okay? Which is something which he does, and obviously if you attack him, you can kind of exacerbate this a little bit. Then there's also witches, okay, which is another perfect enemy of the iron golems. So let's take a look at these witches and let's see what makes them a little bit different. So first of all, one thing we can notice is they're leaning forwards, okay? So they kind of look a bit more hunchbacked. They look a little bit more decrepit, like old magical witches should be in the real world. And you'll see that their eyes are moving from left to right again, so there's more expression in the face. The nose has that slight hinge to it as usual, and this witch looks like she wants a little bit of action because she's heading towards this iron golem to start a bit of a war, which actually should be pretty interesting. Let's just go ahead and spawn another one because she's not going to go up that mountain. I don't think she's athletic enough for that. So let's just make another iron golem. Fight this witch. Okay. Boom. Oh, okay. This iron golem has beat me to it. Let's spawn another witch. Okay, so already you can see that the witch is still behaving as usual. And she's taking the potions. I don't think there's particle effects in you. And you can see when she gets hit, the cool thing is her hat bobs up and down. So it's kind of like a cartoon effect. So this resource pack is very cartoony in the way that it changes the animations. So it's really cool to see. Okay, so the Vindicator is up next, which is a very simple Pillager. Now, what makes the Vindicator a little bit different? So first of all, he's kind of in an action stance. His idle animation, he has both of his arms from left to right, kind of relaxed, but also a little bit tense, ready to strike. And he has the same kind of posture with his legs, which are parted in the middle. And he has a shifty eye motion, looking from left to right. And he's basically in a battle stance. And he has the new breathing animations. And when you go from left to right, he kind of stares at you in the corner of his eye, which is a little bit creepy, but it's also really cool. So it makes him look pretty tough. And his walk animation is a little bit more fluid than it usually is. It has a bit more spring to his step and a bit more life to it. As for in terms of action, I do not know yet, but I guess we can always try this out, because the iron golem is always ready for a fight. So you can see he's a 2-strike kill. So most of the time, he's not going to attack until he actually has a chance to do so. Now, I think the normal Vindicators spawn with axes, right? Or maybe that's just a feature which I probably should have been paying more attention to. I thought normal Vindicators spawn with axes out, so I'm not sure if this is a new feature where he draws the axe and then lunges and runs into battle. I think it could be, but I haven't really encountered Vindicators enough. But you'll see he has kind of like a crazy face when he's getting ready to strike, which is pretty cool. Evokers. So these are the magical casters. And as you can see, usually Evokers, they have the arms kind of just out static and still when they actually cast a spell. But you'll see now Evokers have a new animation where they kind of whirl their arms. So as you can see, he's kind of spinning his arms from side to side to cast his spell. So it's a little bit different than how he usually would. And you can see those Vexes are just going to finish off the Iron Golem right there. So a little bit more interesting in these animations, okay? Now, the unfortunate thing is the Iron Golem is literally going to make quick, swift work of this Evoker before I can kind of show you close up. But you get the basic idea. So it makes for some really cool, interesting battles. Then we have standard Pillagers. So these guys, they will have a new running animation with a crossbow. So instead of just holding the crossbow straight forwards, they will now hold it downwards, a bit more tactically, just like holding a gun. Most people, when they're holding a weapon, they don't hold it straight up in front of them. They hold it down when they're moving. This is something which the SWAT team does. So it's a bit more realistic in the animations. And they have the crazy effects on the eyes again. So a little bit better in the movement. The Ravager, this is pretty cool too. It pounces and it kind of gallops. Okay, so I'm not sure if you noticed that. So Ravagers are extremely powerful. So if you're thinking about what can be a match for the Iron Golems, Ravagers, okay? Not only do the Ravagers kind of gallop and bounce, they also, when they attack with the horns, the head actually stretches and kind of is a little bit more exaggerated with its attack. It kind of chomps and stretches its neck out and basically strikes the Golem, okay? Now this Ravager is pretty powerful, and you can see in the water where he's trapped, you can kind of see his actual movement animation. And you can see his mouth opens and his eyebrow goes up and down as well. So the facial animations are kind of what gives life to this pack. Obviously zombies, you've seen them, but I will just show you again just as an example. And you can see zombies are a little bit more realistic, okay? If you watch The Walking Dead and you see how zombies move, this is kind of what you'd expect them to move as. They don't move too fast. They don't move too slow, but they have the arms out in front of them when they move. And they're a little bit more fluid with the movement, okay? The legs are parted a little bit. The arms move from left to right and up and down. And the neck kind of hinges as well. So there's a lot more movement to them, which is a bit more impressive. So the order of the mobs which I'm actually showcasing to you is actually the order from oldest to newest. So the animations you see further throughout the video are the newer ones, which have been added in the more recent updates. So let's take a look at the creepers, shall we? So creepers, what's different about creepers? They have now an idle animation where their body kind of stretches and skews, and they walk on all fours still, but you'll see that when they move, the legs are a little bit more hinged, there's more rotation to them, they're more separated, and they have this kind of slouched movement where they kind of pan forwards as they move. So a lot more of an interesting lifelike animation right here. I'm not sure what the difference is when they kaboom. We could go into survival mode and see the creeper explode. And nothing seemed to change there. It was more so the movement. Then we have husks. So there's not really too much difference with these guys in terms of comparison to normal zombies. They kind of just move the same, like an idle animation, which is pretty interesting. And these are obviously desert variants. Then we have zombie villagers. So these guys, they have the arms by the side now when they're idle. And then when they move, they bring their arms to the front. And you'll also see the eyes are kind of a little bit more goggly and goofy, which kind of makes it a bit more believable because they are zombies and they're supposed to kind of have a low IQ and kind of be brain dead. Then skeletons. So what's different about skeletons? Skeletons, I would personally say, are probably usually the most boring mob in terms of the movement because they just have the arms out fully and they don't really ever look like they're holding anything. I think this is new as well. So now the skeletons have a sling around them, which I believe is called a quiver, where you hold the arrows in it. So they now have a quiver around them and they're actually holding the bow in one of their arms properly, as they should be, which looks a lot more immersive, okay? So if you're running some RPG mods or have an RPG texture pack, this just makes things look so much better. Wither skeletons. So wither skeletons, interesting. Okay, so they probably have some of the least changes, but you'll see now when they walk with a sword, they kind of drag it behind them to show the actual weight of the weapon. So one arm is panned a little bit further back, which is the weapon arm, and then the other arm is kind of just sitting statically, and then the legs are parted. And you can see now, you can notice when you look at it with the skeleton, it's actually shaking a lot, okay? So it kind of shows that maybe it's like a resurrected skeleton that's been like reanimated using magic or some kind of dark magic or something. I don't really know the backstory behind them, but the skeleton's shaking, it makes it look a bit more undead. which is pretty cool. Then we have the pigs. So what's changed about the pigs? Well, first of all, they've added these flappy ears onto them, just like the piglins, which look really cute. And the legs are a little bit more rotated when they walk around, so it looks a bit more realistic. As for Wandering Traders, they do look a bit different. Now, I'm not sure why this Wandering Trader just took an invisibility potion. Now, the coolest one for me, which I think is actually going to be the hardest to showcase, is the Phantom. Now, I'm not sure if I can give you a good look here. The Phantom's wing flapping is one of the most awesome things which is added in this pack. They rotate a little bit more when they fly, and their wings have a little bit more of a hinge to them. I know I keep saying that, but basically, there's a few more pivot points to the wings, which make them look a bit more realistic. Now, usually the Phantom's wings will pivot from one point, but these have like 2 or 3 new folds to give it a little bit more rotation. Phantoms, I think, are probably one of the best animations, and obviously since they're a flying mob, it makes it a little bit more unique. Then we have the Blaze. So what's different about the Blaze? Well, basically the head, which floats in limbo, it pans from left to right, and as it moves, it does slant a little bit forwards. Now, it's quite hard to see because of all these smoke particles, but you'll see it kind of bobs up and down, and its head's panned. And I think what would be really cool is if we use the physics mod with this resource pack, because then when we attack the Blaze and defeat it, it would break up into pieces too, which would kind of make the effect even cooler. Okay, for the last collection of mobs which are animated, let's take a look at the very final groups. So the first is the Enderman, okay? So the Enderman's kind of interesting. As it moves, it kind of puts its head to the ground and stares at the floor, and it slouches a little bit forwards. But since it's so long, there's not really too much room for movement. So as you can see, it kind of has its head down, keeping itself to itself. It looks from left to right on the floor, and it has a bit more of a range of vision, and it moves with longer strides, okay? Now, for some reason, this Wandering Villager has reappeared in a pretty comical way. Then Guardians and Elder Guardians, so we're going to move on to the water mobs. So if we just spawn them. Now, I haven't actually been to that many monuments in survival mode, so I probably won't see the changes. So you guys will probably have to kind of give me some hints here. But what I believe has changed is I think there's a few more pivot points on the tail. So the tail is a little bit more fluid in terms of how it moves from left to right. And I believe they've probably just done the same with Elder Guardians. So I think there's just more points of rotation, and these kind of pulse a little bit. All of these little appendages pulse. I don't think that's like that in vanilla, but correct me if I'm wrong. There's some of the mobs which I've probably seen the least in game, so I should probably know that. And then we have the spider and the cave spider. So what's changed about these guys? Well, if you have a very keen eye, you can look that they now have, I think they're called mandibles. I can't remember, you'll have to correct me in the comments. Basically, the mouth area, we have these new appendages at the front, which are kind of like the jaws, and they move from left to right and kind of snap open and closed. And also the back is a little bit different. So the back of the spider, which is behind the thorax, I believe, which is the tail. I believe actually this is called the abdomen, because you have the head, which is the top, and then you have the middle, which is basically the thorax, and then you have the abdomen. So the abdomen at the back is basically now moving and kind of pulsing a little bit, and it's rotated to face upwards towards the sky to give the insect a bit more shape. And in terms of the cave spider, it's basically the same animations and rotations, it's just a lot smaller, so it's kind of hard to tell. It makes spiders a little bit more imposing inside abandoned mineshafts and inside dungeons and in the overworld at night, so basically keep clear of them. Silverfish. Silverfish, their tails just rotate a little bit more and they swing from left to right in a more fluid animation, and they have new idle animations where they basically breathe and pulsate, which makes them a little bit more creepy and imposing as insects, because nobody likes insects, especially when they're moving around even more than they usually do. Vexes you saw earlier, which was summoned by the Vindicators, the Evokers, I believe. Now, it's kind of hard to see what's different about Vexes, but if you have a really careful eye and zoom in, you can see that the wings rotate a little bit better, which makes them look really cool, and some of their limbs rotate a little bit more, but since they're so tiny, it's really hard to show this effect close up. Then we have Drowned. So Drowned, they basically just share the same animations as zombies. Parted legs, slouched forwards, arms kind of sagging forwards, and the head just glancing at the ground and from side to side, just like they're on a completely different plane of existence. Makes them seem a bit more mindless, as the mindless undead that they should be. And then strays are the final mob, which is in the fresh animations pack, which are basically just going to kind of share the same animation as skeletons, okay? So basically they are very similar to skeletons, but also with the skeletons. So if you can get close to them, they kind of shake a little bit and flutter around, which shows the kind of animated undead appearance, where they're not actually real humans, they are definitely undead because they're shaking they have like bone problems. And you can see he's holding his bow on his right arm, kind of down by his hip. So it's pretty cool. The walk animation is kind of basic, but the idle animation, them shaking with all the bones and kind of shivering, makes them seem a bit more believable and a bit more kind of like a fantasy feeling to them. So this was the Fresh Animations resource pack, which completely changes how all the mobs function and feel. But the great thing about this pack for me personally is the vanilla appeal to it. It really fits well into the whole vanilla feeling of Minecraft, because it doesn't really change the whole style of how the mobs move to a certain extent, which makes them unbelievable to the original game's feeling and purpose. So this will really blend in well with the original game without changing it too much. So you can run this alongside other resource packs because it does support complete randomization, so it will work with 90% of the packs. As long as you're running Optifine alongside your game, you should probably not really have any issues with it. This is what I'd really recommend to use if you can't install a mod like MoBenz, for an example, which has some mob changes in it too, and this just completely uses a no mod experience by just utilizing the resource packs feature. So if you can't mod your game, or if the mod's not been updated to a new version, you can run this with any version of Minecraft because it's updated usually to the newest version whenever available. So if you have any questions, do put them down below. Make sure to like the video and share it if it was unique and awesome, and subscribe for some more awesome mods that you probably won't see anywhere else, and if you do, you'll see them early on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
I be the show, make a room, shaking it down. I be the with a high profile, everybody come on. We be the shakers with a crazy style, showing everybody how to enjoy a crazy wild. One time rocking to the sound, jailing women everywhere. I be the big down, swing at a hospital, super chick.
Baby, come on, you better rock with me. I be the hot shot player from nowhere to my